Hello, and a very warm welcome to our webinar, FTOs Done Right. I'm Ricardo from Ebyp, and I'm very curious how it will be today. I already saw in the chats we have great IP professionals with us, so I feel challenged, and I'm excited to show what I have for you. So, as I mentioned, I am from Evip, which is a small German IP company, which is all about IP engineering, and we're providing IP services for IP professionals. And one big part of our work is FTOs. And we saw in our history a lot of things that can be avoided and other things which are very important due to the recent change in our IP sector. So please stay tuned and be curious about what I have for you. First of all, I'd like to invite you, if you are not connected, please follow me or my company. Feel free to reach out to connect with me. I'm always happy to help. So I'm always open for a conversation. Would be my pleasure. Now, I started the preparation of this webinar, and I was thinking like, yeah, I will explain everything in 30 minutes about FTO. And then I get more and more in detail about what this means. And I was thinking like, oh, that's more like a day seminar. So I made a decision. And sorry if there I overpromised something that I couldn't do today. But for this meeting, for this webinar, we will focus on the managing aspects of the FTO rather than the search strategies and the search find things or so. But therefore I have something for you if you have come with this expectation. You will receive this at the end. I will share it in LinkedIn as well, that you have here a fine selection of good resources and recommendations with professional search tools, which all work good or have a new interesting approach, and also professional service providers. My company is called Ebyp. I have to put there my name of the company, and I promise this also the sole shameless self-advertising in this webinar. Okay, so therefore, if you need to learn more about the search aspects or this, I was thinking of doing a webinar about pattern search like a pro, which is in a rough concept state at the moment. But please feel free to contact any of those entities. They are all kind of my friends. And if you say you come from Ricardo, they will treat you with certain respect. Now, what is my plan for this webinar with you? So first of all, we want to discuss what is freedom to operate, that we have a working definition that we can use for this webinar. Then what could you do wrong? And what you could do wrong. And then what is Gigo? What a typical FTO process looks like, and what means this to you? What is the difference between relevancy versus infringement? And for you, why is this important as an IP manager? And what is FTO how does FTO looks like in an integrated IP management, as for example, Professor Wurzer and the SIP proclaims it with the DIN 7706. And at the end, I also have a free FTO checklist and FTO order template for businesses that they please can use if you don't have it already. So that at the end, if you listen to me that long time, that you are that it was for sure worth. Now let's speak about what is what is freedom to operate. I don't know if you ever have tried to type definition freedom to operate in Google, and you find a lot of things from companies, blogs, and this. And I picked two, and I learned the following: that we agree to disagree. There are certain freedom to operate is a term which is often used and can be differently understood. Therefore, be careful. For some, it's the ability to exploit a product or process, which makes sense now without infringing intellectual property rights. For other ones, they speak about the freedom to operate analysis, which is which is more the work that you do to get an opinion if you have this ability or not. And there are also words like clearance or infringement search or product clearance or patent clearance. And there's a freedom to operate search, and there's a freedom to operate analysis. And this all means different things. And you have to be careful about this. And therefore, I pick here two that I think they're quite good. Also, the IMIP wiki is good. You see, I name competitors and other players in the field because I think we are not the only one which are clever. And for us, for our work today, I made my own definition for it, how I understand the freedom to operate. It's a set of activities at defined points in time that allows forming an opinion if exploiting a product or service without infringing third-party rights is possible. It contains the identification and evaluation of rights, and ideally as ongoing activities across the product lifecycle. That's now not a definition I expect you to learn by heart or so, but just have this in mind. Now, if I speak here about FTO, it's about what I want that I can seek this, that I speak about the activities to achieve to assure that we have the ability, and that I see this always as an ongoing business process within our IP management. Now, if you look in IPRs in 2021, there's from the EPO. For patents, you see there's one major trend. That's digital, the digital communication. And especially if you follow Professor Wurzer and this IP and the studies there, you will learn very soon that even showers are nowadays digitized. So if you did before a freedom to operate analysis for a shower head or so, it was too pure technical and physical. And nowadays you have a lot of digital aspects. And my question would be to you, in your FTO work, how much do you look into the digital realm as well? And therefore, at the moment, a lot of the digital, all the technologies in connectivity or so, they are enabling technologies, which means they're in general applicable. And therefore, that can really increase the amount of an FTO to a huge extent. And therefore, if you're not aware, was not aware of this fact today, congratulations, this webinar maybe has already paid off for you. So thank you, but please stay in this webinar. So what you could do wrong, this was one aspect. People often overlook the digital aspect. I had this as well, that people approached me and said, hey, Ricardo, we need an FTO, so a patent search for FTO. Can you do it? It needs to be done within 1 week, very fast. Do it briefly. We need to do it because it was too late. Issued. The project manager was approaching the IP manager of the small company like 3 weeks before product launch. Therefore, very difficult. Typical mistake. FTO is only a patent search. It's called IP rights, not patent rights. And most people, you are IP manager, not the patent manager. So please, a freedom to operate is more than this. And people will joke a bit about what I understand with all this scope of search, but this is very important. Not only a patent search, please. The project budget is too tight. I think that's the common thing in IP, that there's never ever too much budget for everything. And that the next thing that I see more recently is that the search strategy is not ideal. There can be for some time I saw patent searches where there are no patent classes used, and or no keywords, or not the competitors included, and therefore it can be done more clever. And also, the FTO was conducted for the wrong subject. Now, there was a communication issue, or that the product developed itself further in a total different direction. If you have a very agile organization which pursues value, it can be that the product you started in the beginning has very few in common with the solution that you provide at the end. And therefore, it's important to have this in mind. And that the FTO is considered only, as I mentioned earlier, for physical features, but not without the use case or the digital solution in mind. And therefore, I have there already some quick fixes for you where you can think about is FTOs for copyright, design, trademarks, domain names too. And now you think like, yeah, design, trademark, sure, but Ricardo, copyright, yeah, it's the ability to exploit something. And for example, if you have a packaging designer which takes in a nice picture from the internet, where's the copyright on it, literally you infringe the right too. Therefore, please speak with your lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not entitled to legal advice, but it's also something about freedom to operate. I met once a law firm, and I was very surprised that they found a domain like lawyers in Mannheim. And it was free, and I was wondering why it's free. It's a very valuable domain. The problem is if you want to use it, you need to put all attorneys of Mannheim in on that page, not only your firm. So basically, there was no freedom to operate for that domain as well. Therefore, there's some aspects. Please have this in mind. FTOs is not only about patents. In general, raise IP awareness. If people are very savvy and understand, okay, how to read patents, that there's something like copyright, that your processes are very well defined and how they look and how they can start them, that you use specifications like standardized ordering templates or checklists, which help you to don't forget anything, and also by the questionnaire of the ordering template, provide the search professional with all the information they need. That's great. In general, there's to cover this budget thing is the responsibility and the budget. Put it, my recommendation, to the product development or as part of the R&D cost. Just because if they develop something, they want to use it, and therefore they need to cover the cost. I know it's a bit political and thing, but it's very good to save your IP budget, and also it's really something which is there. Just think about it. And as always, if someone takes ownership, things are done correctly. Therefore, designate for each FTO a responsible for it, which keep track of it. Now, it's sometimes people come and says like, hey, I like to have freedom to operate. And the problem, and this knows a lot of knows a lot of the of the professionals of you, is there's no 100%. Therefore, we could ask something like, how much of assured freedom to operate do you like? And therefore, you have always the question between the economic interest versus the economic risk. And therefore, with a freedom to operate analysis and search that we conduct, we reduce the risk because we become aware of the IP rights and we can manage that. And therefore, it is dependent. It's very important to have on one hand the economic interest in mind. How much money do you make with this product? Is this your core product? Is this very important? And then in comparison to the thing. And I mentioned before some AI tools, which I consider great for if you need this first overview search for products. Therefore, they can be great. Before you don't do any, please consider that tools. They're so easy to use. You can even give them to your R&D guys. It's a first good start, better than nothing, and better than just using free tools. And then the more exhaustive search, this is good for your products that you're using. There are more things. You use more advanced tools in combination, also sometimes with the AI tools. Also then done by professional search entities. I just see that there's a question in the chat about what is the price range. It depends. For overview searches, you have something like, depending on region, in Europe, overview searches goes between 1,500 to 3,000 euros. Exhaustive searches, roughly, we speak only about the search, it's like 5,000. And depending on how many results you have, they need to be interpreted by a patent attorney which does an infringement analysis. The infringement analysis is usually based on an hourly rate, or you make a cap price, but you can think about like 3,000 to 5,000 euros about patent. But don't fixate me on that price range. It's just a rough estimate. Therefore, IP awareness helps, and I show you later some trick how to reduce the amount a bit. So, the first thing in order, if you want to reduce the amount, is now where to start an FTO. No matter how small your product is, in terms of searching for freedom to operate and to avoid all the rights, it can become very soon very large, especially if you have if you have a connected aspect or digital business model behind this, it can come a lot of it to it. And therefore, is my recommendation. I learned this from Forum Institute. Therefore, I can recommend the IP Manager course. This was, for me, the tidbit of it. Now, the safe haven approach. And the idea is simply that you first, that you have your subject that you have, and you analyzing it. And what you try to do is you do a search to identify all the public domain aspects, which means free, if it's technical, free prior art that you can use. For example, if you have a hairdryer, hair dryers are older than 20 years, so there's a lot of technology there, which means that a lot of the aspects of the hairdryer maybe are free or were already known 20 years before, so there can't be any patent which protects that thing ideally. Sometimes there can be rights which you still should do an FTO, but what I'd like you to do is with that you have your features of interest. In the public domain aspects, there are no features of interest. You don't need them. To take too much emphasis and spend your limited FTO budget on the features of interest. And then you perform an FTO analysis. And also there are small tricks. One is sometimes if you have a modular product, you may have done an FTO earlier that you can reuse, that you can update for a low price. And also if it's a part that you buy, that you import or get supplied, ask the supplier to do the FTO. And with that, you can save your budget. Good. And focus the rest on the stuff which is really on the product perhaps itself. And therefore, at the end, you need to act on results. That's the safe haven approach. I hope this is something you can use. And now we speak about the Gigo. And maybe you smile about this. This is something what often happens is garbage input results in garbage output. And therefore, sometimes I receive vague definitions or vague descriptions of inventions. And it's difficult, and you have to empathize. And the better I know something, the more vague it can be. Nevertheless, it can happen that the search perhaps at the end is not so good and I have to redo it. And therefore, it helps to have a good FTO order template, which on one hand goes on all the administrative topics, the context of the search, and the technical matter or the subject of the search. There's one thing which makes really great input, which for me is that you define what are your special key features and what are your features of no interest. And now, as I mentioned, the digital aspects of the product, if it's a connected hairdryer, for example, and it depends on the experience that the patent searcher has, that the searcher has with you. It's good sometimes to describe a typical use case or the business model that the people understand. That's about. And sometimes with that, they get more direction in this. I understand it's a bit more effort, but it pays off usually. Now we speak about the FTO process and you. And this process, I made this process definition as part back then, 2018, as part of an offer for a company. And it's usually kind of the same process. You have always a first phase, which is the preparation. You have a second phase, which is an exploration. And you have a third phase where you have execution and analysis. And the fourth phase is like a reiteration if you need to update something. So in the first phase, there's the preparation, information gathering. Basically, now speaking in our webinar, that's part of your responsibility. It says you give all the information, you set up the boundaries, you say what you want. Then the searcher, what he does is he try to think how to answer your inquiry. Therefore, he starts with a search design. Now, for patents, they make patent classes, keywords, concepts, and so on. For trademark, they think of different word forms of it to see if there's a picture, the different alternatives or so. There's thing, and then the good ones, they do like smart search, where they validate their search design until they see, oh, okay, now we catch everything that's good to answer, and then they perform the search. And now this is very important. What you have to understand is this kind of search, this FTO, patent search or search for FTO, is like a picture. You took a picture, and the moment you have taken, it's outdated. And therefore you have a blind spot of publication. Which means if you make an FTO in the beginning of something, the very next day it can be outdated. And therefore it's important perhaps that you not only do one FTO, you do multiple FTOs, at least one before the product, shortly before the product launch, to see if there's anything which can become a problem or so. And therefore, there's this blind spot of publication, just be aware of it. So, in that phase 2 and phase 3, what happens? First is it will be searched, then there's a screening for relevancy. This is something very important, the screening for relevancy, so that only the documents that are really towards your of interest, that they come into the analysis, because in analysis you look into deeply that. And then depending if you need it, you reiterate, you make a new search, or you set up an action plan what to do. Usually you inform the business, you tell what you make a, depending if you have found something where there's a potential risk for infringement, there's sorry, I was shortly distracted. If there's an infringement or so, there are certain steps you can take. And now it comes also for this process, the tip or the hack is advise the correct resources. Especially in the beginning, it's okay to have IP knowledgeable subject matter experts and IP professionals which conduct the search. It's basically my business model. We provide the patent search for the attorneys or for the IP departments. That is what we do. And the subject matter experts, they look at my results, they see, oh, okay, this one is relevant, this one is not relevant after the screening. And then the patent attorneys take this curated list and then go one by one patent and does an infringement analysis, which usually starts with the legal status, they check if it's still viable, and then an element by element comparison. So have this in mind. The overall process is like, your searcher, they identify relevant rights containing at least one or more element of your subject. And in the second step, your subject matter experts, your engineers or so, they review the list, they confirm, or they confirm or delete some elements, and then prioritize the list with the most important rights where they think they are the most applicable, depending on the part what it is. And then the legal advisor gives their infringement analysis, and then you have to act. That's the way usually an FTO works, and therefore please have in mind there's a difference between relevancy versus infringement. And as patent searcher, I don't do infringement analysis. That's not my job. I'm thinking, the thing is I understand how infringement works so that I could identify what is relevant. This is a different topic, please, of the patent attorneys which listen here. I would love to hear it from you. So, the freedom to operate in IP management. Now, what you here can see, you saw that image earlier, and it's a PDCA circle. If you're very knowledgeable about quality management, you're well aware that this is from quality management, which means that you plan, do, check, act. Now we have a new standard in IP, which is the German standard, the DIN 77006, which is basically the requirements for IP management, and it applies a lot of the logic of the quality management. And one aspect is that you have a process approach, that you manage risk, and that you use that PDCA circles to plan, do, check, and act. And how does it look for our FTO process? Why you don't check? Does that exclude? Okay, I will go to that question later on. Gerald, please remind me of this. This is a very important and good question, and I will tell you why. Because I use filtering techniques, therefore it's also part of protecting myself. So let me finish this and I will answer this, okay? So yeah, PDCA, plan, do, check, act. And therefore, if you, for example, discuss with Professor Wurzer, he has the opinion that he says, hey, the planning in our IP management, in the realm of IP management, usually comes too short. We are more reactive to other ones. And therefore, with the planning is about what is the resources, the responsibles, and the appropriate the forecast of the work which will come in the case of the FTO. It says how we want, who does it, with what, how he does it, and how much will come somehow so that we have the resources there. Then there's the doing, and therefore it can be that you perform the FTO yourself or you give it outside. There's a process, and the process needs to be on one hand managed, owned, or performed. And you also have perhaps your providers and you work with them, you send them the stuff and you also have to check it. And I have to take it back. Then the next thing is that you check the work. On one hand on validity, on the other hand you verify, and the third is the performance, the KPI. The performance is very important to give you an idea if your process is good, if it takes too much time. I know a lot of IP professionals, I'm always very impressed by them, how hardworking they are. And therefore, I think it's important to understand what takes the most time. And we have a very complicated subject sometimes with IP and different contexts, a lot of stakeholders, and therefore it's important to understand the performance. And what is the difference? Perhaps verification and validity. And here, from my friend Thomas Salvador, I learned once, verification would be, for example, if you have a recipe for a cake, that you check mark that all ingredients are in. Validity would be that you taste the cake and says, it tastes well. And therefore, it's not only verification that the FTO was performed in a certain time and you have a result at the end. Validity would be as well that you check, for example, the search strategy. Was it done correctly for the correct subject? And also, I got one client just because his former search provider was not willing to share their search strategy. So therefore, it's important. It shows you if a pattern searcher shows the search strategy and guide you through. That's really something about trust, and helps you to understand if this is a viable product, viable result or not. And that's important. And then we have the act. Act is also sometimes overlooked in IP because we're all so busy with the doing and understaffed, under budget. But this is about improving, changing, and evolving. What we learn from the FTO, and there's a very important aspect of it. You can build with your FTOs after a certain point of time your own patent information system. Now, the results that you have, they're somehow like a curated pattern search that if you put it on your drives, if you make it manageable and you need to pull information, for example, for an opposition or an invalidity case or so, and you have managed it well, you can reuse it. Therefore, this is something a lot of people that I know, they do FTOs, and sometimes they do it for the same matter a couple of times, not knowing that they have already something there or a person. So yeah. Okay, I would like to answer the question of Gerald, where or Mr. Rupert, depends, where he was asking, hey Ricardo, why don't take into consideration the legal status? So first of all, this would be more search related. There's like this. Usually, what I do is I only make a time frame restriction that says 21 years, and I have everything for patents what I need. And the legal status, I get it indicated by my premium databases. And what I then do is that I have different categorizations for the results. And I say everything which is dead for the target jurisdiction or out of the market is less relevant, but still it's somehow relevant. And therefore I make an extra list with less relevant where the people can see. That's the way out I do. Then because with that I said, hey, I found it, but I didn't decide that it's not relevant, and my customer can be informed. This is a way some people like it, some people not. And therefore, for me, I make always like the tree categorization, highly relevant, where it says like, that's the one, they contain major features, they are alive, they're in the target thing, that's the good one. You should really have a look at them. And then there are the likely ones where it says, they have one element or two, they can be, or I don't understand the subject so well, it's something you should have a look to sure. This is the way how I do it. So, and therefore, as I mentioned, the FTO checklist, one part of the planning is that you provide specifications, the way how you search, the way how you perform work, the way what are the steps people have to do. And therefore, this is a so-called specification. And a very good specification and proof or evidence that you have done it is always the checklist. And therefore, I can recommend to ensure that you have checklists and that you develop checklists with your team. They can be digital or on paper. They really ensure that even if you have a bad day, usually after some cases or so, which were very tough or so, it's good to have this. And the other thing is the auto template. Now, I just learned from my clients, the ones, the most professional ones, they have this kind of templates, and they're so good. And therefore, I like to share them with businesses and corporates that don't have it yet. If you're an IP service provider, sorry, do it yourself. No, therefore, this is more for the IP managers, so to help them. There was a question about what IP search software I'm using. Therefore, basically, I will go back to page. To this page, search tools. For me, my main tools at the moment, they are Questel and Docera. That's the two tools that I work with. With IP Screamer, IP Rally, Predori, they are AI tools. I know them, I tested them, they are quite good. The thing is just, in terms for me, in terms of liability, it's good to have the AI plus the conventional search methods too. Therefore, this is more for me as an outside company to do this. And as well, Questel and Docera have AI aspects as well. Therefore, Docera uses AI for concepts, which is quite convenient and good. And in Questel, it has one of the finest, in my opinion, finest AI search wizards for similarity searches, which works quite well. Therefore, this is my personal opinion. Optimine is also an amazing tool because it ignores nearly completely keywords and works with text similarity. Therefore, they're all great tools. And for me, I think what you have, if you need to decide for a tool, is my recommendation. Look on one hand what they have in terms of data quality. Now, depending what you do. I mean, for freedom to operate, it's okay to have fewer documents, not the very old ones of the 1800 or so, or 1700 in the beginning of the patent system. That's more for novelty searches interesting. Therefore, yeah, with the tool, data quality is one hand. The other thing is like, how often can you use it? How good the people can use it. For example, I had one tool that was Derwent. Back then was Thomson Innovation. Amazing data quality, amazing. The search interface, like hell. And after 3 p.m., this was 2017, after 3 p.m., America was online and the software was very slow. Therefore, it was not my favorite tool anymore. Okay, Matthew Luby would love to see those checklists to compare to our own in-house labs. Dependent legal status patents are just important as life. Serve, yeah, challenge later file. Yeah, sure. Therefore, with less relevant, they're there if we need it. Is this session available later offline? Yes, you can always rewatch it in LinkedIn Live, and I will put it also on our YouTube channel. Yeah, surprised that Derwent is not on the list. As I said, I was using it until 2017, and then I didn't use it anymore. I think for sure they have improved as well. Can be. So let me just go to the right thing. Yeah, please also next week there will be a new one about invention disclosure experience. Be curious. And now we are in the Q&A. Can you share the link to the Forum Institute in the chat? Yes, my assistant will do. Okay, some lapsed patents can be revived depending on the country. Oh, very important impact. As I said, it's good to have them in the search identified. I was not aware to revive them. Sounds like zombie patents to me. Therefore, it's good to know. And thank you for this lovely and lively discussion. So, please let me screen. But do you just FTO per feature or per product are usually quite expensive. How you will balance FTO versus budget constraints? First of all, it's a very brilliant question, which is the pain really the pain point for most people. Can you please show it again? Therefore, the FTO per feature, I must say it really depends. What is the economic interest that you have? You know, if this is your core product and the company's survival depends on it, then I would say, okay, spend more. You know, spend more. Also, there's ways. For example, if you start with a patent monitoring, if you train a team to do that kind of FTOs in-house, you can go down with the cost that they do the search stuff, now the identification of the relevant ones by themselves. That usually is a great way to save costs for it, and therefore the FTO per product, I recommend it for overview searches, and the FTO for feature, as I said, if you need to be exhaustive. Therefore, I proclaim very often this that you make a search design and a search, a smart search, which means that you are learning from the data that you have there. And for example, if you, notice that certain aspects of your product, there's a high competition there. There are, for example, competitors specialized in this one feature. Then I would propose for that features, yes. For other things where you think like, okay, there are not so many which have there, or there are very few, and there are our suppliers for, I can pull some strings with my supplier. Usually, if you have a good supplier is your friend and partner. Therefore, they want you to prevail because they make money with you. So if they are specialized in the thing, they can help you. Okay, sometimes there's an alternative to an expensive FTO. If the tech is old, search for prior art older than 20 years and just go ahead. I'm only half joking here. I call it the safe haven approach, as earlier mentioned. But correct. This is one aspect. But be careful, even if a tech is old, sometimes I don't know what is happening, sometimes it can happen that still an IP right is in force. Therefore, it's not really that you can say, oh, it's older than 20 years, I don't care. That's sometimes a bit difficult. I agree with FTO can cost a lot of money. And therefore, what I can recommend is like a bit like it's like eating a whale, you know? And how you eat a whale, bite by bite. So usually if you set up your IP management, if you have your R&D processes going on, and you start monitoring for your products or so, that helps to reduce, because then the whale is perhaps already eaten a bit. I mean, we have to be also careful. If you have an engineer which doesn't have a clue about patents, doesn't understand them, and then there's an US patent, you know, and then they all people have this fear of this willful infringement then. Therefore, it's like there needs to be an IP awareness, people need to be trained, and then then you start the monitoring, and then it reduces the load. So, not very experienced with FTOs. My question is, if only one feature of a product is disclosed in any of the claims, should be that considered relevant? So, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to teach about infringement. What I would do is, if I have a patent there and I see that in the claims somehow there's a feature like I would have in my product, I would say, yes, it's relevant. Please go to your legal advisor, show him that, because there's a potential infringement. You know, in infringement, there are a lot of things, but what usually an attorney does is an element by element comparison. And then he shows from the claim are all elements in your product present. And then the tick box, tick, 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 tick. Which means even if your product has much more features or so, if there are only a few, if the claim is fulfilled, every element or comparably every element, you're infringing that kind of product. And the problem is, it's really depends on sometimes how you understand that wording. And that's the reason why we need attorneys, and it's the reason why attorneys, the patent attorneys, get a lot of money, because it's damn tricky and you need to be a real professional. And in my opinion, pay it. Just pay it. It's the best. The guys are super clever and I have my greatest respect. I hope I have answered this question. So we have a group for best practices if everyone will connect. Okay, thank you. Invite me, please. I need to learn too. I'm not always open. Okay, what other questions do you have? May I ask? The freedom to operate for products, how often do you do? Do you do them only once or multiple times? Could you please answer that in the chat? Oh, an excellent question about standards. I mean, with standard essential patents, it's indeed tricky. On one hand, it's like this: if something is standard essential, you as understood. Please don't think, because it's not my business with licensing standard essential patents. Just as I can recall the FRAND licensing conditions. So if something is a standard essential patents and identified, at least you can get a license, which is good, and then which is also fair, and therefore if you see it from a risk exposure is something different than your ARC competitor who who never would give you a license, has a patent or so. Therefore, this is a thing. Matthew Lovey says it's ongoing and done at different intervals along the R&D cycle. Perfect, Matthew. That's a very good way. That's a very good way to do it. And I believe as well, it's an ongoing thing. Plan, do, check, act, as I said. And if you do the R&D cycle, you know at some point when you start something, when it's going on, and when there are the major decisions, if it's to have there the FTOs upfront, planned and done perfectly. What should be search strategy for FTO? Broad on domain or narrow on each feature? This is a very tricky question, because I can give you the unfulfilling answer, it depends. And therefore, the question is, how much money do you have for the FTO? How much time do you have? What is the subject? And sometimes you have a very populated field. If you would be broad, you would have like thousands of patents to evaluate. Then you maybe need to be more detailed. Therefore, it's tricky. There's no real question for it. I would always say, think about the cake. Taste the cake. You put yourself in the shoes of the people, and that's like, okay, is this enough to sustain the economic rest and to answer the question of the client? We do it usually. Hubert. We do it usually once, maybe a second time if the project goes on for a longer period of time. Yeah, also my recommendation is, depending on what kind of software you use, you can like rerun them and just do the delta search. And as I said, yourself, you can do the relevancy estimation. With that is for a comparably low price or low effort, and then you see if something has changed. Because if you have done a very good job with your initial FTO or the product hasn't changed a lot, it's maybe still liable. Okay, pretty depends on new features as NBI adds new features. High value for market, it's always done, at least tier 1 countries. Yeah, correct. Someone answered Hubert also the same what I say. Yeah, therefore with the update searches, they're one thing. I think another thing that people often don't see, if we speak about budget, we often think about money, but it's not only money, it's also about the time. And at some point, the work day is over for an IP manager. And you have a lot of subjects to manage. That's difficult. And therefore, what I know that what one IP manager does, which I think is quite brilliant, is he has an email folder called FTOs. And what he does is that every time he does a new FTO, he put the email into that folder when he has the result done, put it in the folder and look into the folder of their FTOs. And if the product is still alive or ongoing, they keep it there. If it's not, he removes them. And with that, he has somehow an idea about what are the FTO topics ongoing in his company without losing his mind all the time. And therefore, it's one solution. We performed the FTO a couple of times during the product R&D. First during the ideation of the product, and last before commercialization of the product. Very good, Sohan, very good. It depends on, I don't know what is exactly a product, how fast it is. Maybe it can be good for engineers to also in between. There's one thing we have to be careful is ideas are free and contagious, which means if you use your R&D engineers to monitor something, sometimes they process it in their brain, and then it could be that they think that's their own idea and they develop something which was in a patent. Therefore, it's like the in-between can have down and upsides. Therefore, it's very good to have this IP awareness and to make the patent information, or not only patent information, also design information visible. No one doing a classic novelty search at the beginning of an R&D project. Everyone's starting with an FTO already. That's a brilliant question. That's a brilliant question, because I don't know if you've heard of this principles. There's this principle not invented here and proudly stolen elsewhere, and therefore Thomas Edison, which is one of the most famous inventors in all time, he made a famous quote that I love to cite, where he says, like, I didn't invent anything. I just continued where the last person stopped. This was his thing. He was known for it, reading a lot of patent informations, in terms also from a novelty, and then building on top of that last thought of the person. And therefore, this is one thing. With the classic novelty search, there's the thing, like, it depends. If you do something with digital stuff, there's the moment so many patents there, people are drawn in that information. This can be one reason. But I agree with, if you do an FTO in the beginning, it's good perhaps if you do more like a white spot analysis. So what is out there, there's a landscape, and then you go on. All of patent database is good, but no one of them is exhaustive. So what's the best practice for accesses till date of search? That's an excellent question. You know, it's not only about patent database, any database. For me, it's like, if it's really important, I would say use the patent office databases. Use your premium databases, and then go with the kind of similar search strategy to the patent office databases, depending on your data provider. It takes 1 week, up to 1 week, to import the data from the patent office to the premium database. So there can be a gap. That's the thing where I can be aware. And therefore, at some point, you have always a bit of a risk. There's no thing. Therefore, Markus Schneider, you still need to evaluate the relevance of the result documents, which is the major work, and time it. Agree. After the search strategy is found, also it happens that the product features change. Accordingly, you need to adjust the strategy, do respective new search. Other than that, I agree. Yeah, Martin, I fully agree with you. I fully agree with you. And therefore, there's a very brilliant master thesis from my colleague, Tobias Lipp, which is about FTO for agile software development, which goes in this answering this question. You can find it on the Ebyp blog. It's worth reading. Any best practices to take care of patent publications that are not published at the time of final clearance search? What is the best practice? I mean, this is the blind spot of publication I'm talking to. No chance. The only thing that you can do is that you do either monitoring or at some point an update search. And the problem and anything else, we need to ask the lawyers. They know how to deal with it. No, I just can speak how I can identify them. And there's the problem. Sometimes the publication, they may come after that. Therefore, as I said, there's a certain economic risk. Perhaps there's one idea. I assume now you know your competitors. And depending on the size of the competitors, they have something like earning calls, product launches, R&D festivals or so. And then you look somehow in the roadmap where they want to go. And if you have the feeling like, oh, they specialized in a certain technology, for example, inductive heating technology or so, you can be sure at some point they will file something. And if you use the same product, you need to be careful about this, especially if you know in which direction they may develop. Yeah. Martin Liebmann, you're right. That's always good if you're right. That's why I corrected my reply to part of the hard work. I wanted to write the hard work. Perfect. I really like it that this is such a lovely discussion and so active. And therefore, thank you. Are there more questions? We have still 8 minutes left. Can consider patent pool memberships to clear some potential infringement patents found during FTO. I'm not a lawyer. I think a patent pool membership is always, if you have there something found and it belongs to a patent pool and you can become a member, yes, it makes sense. It can make sense. Therefore, but it's depending on the subject and the context and your company. Therefore, always, this is also what I like to preach. My little daughter is be clever. Be clever and make your own opinion. And therefore, it depends on the context. And if you analyze the context and set up your rules for decision, you're always on the safe side. The same goes for the searches that I do. I'm liable for it. Even as a manager director of my own company, I'm liable for this as well. It's done correctly. And therefore, you need to have a procedure. And if you have a procedure that is based on common sense, that is applying best practices, you're going in a good direction. But as part of an IP, sometimes you can do everything right and still get sued. So, a bit tricky. Are there any other questions? General Rupert. The novelty search is usually done before I decide to file patents. Usually the time gap between the time patent, yes. I think about the topic with the novelty search. Isn't it more that the landscape is more interesting for this white spot, where you say, okay, you want to have a landscape to see what is there out thing that you can find. Therefore, this can be. I was thinking more about landscapes, and therefore, landscaping is a very difficult thing, which can also cost a lot of money. And if you need to get it properly, therefore, it's better, in my opinion. It's good instead of getting the landscapes for your fields of business, start the patent monitoring, and at some point in time, you have built your own landscape with this, with a taxonomy that you understand, and that is for you most important. How to do FTOs on open innovation. Okay, what is open innovation? Open innovation for me is that I include people in my innovation process, that I get ideas from outside. The question, and therefore the question is, if you look at our definition, therefore it was important to make it, that you can execute your, or exploit your product or process without infringing any IP rights. The question would be for the open innovation, what kind of rights they have? And therefore, this would be the question mark, and therefore I would pinpoint my FTO perhaps in this direction, that I would look, what rights they have. And therefore, it can be like, sometimes if it's there are some people that are very brilliant, and they go into each of these innovation challenges, and some of them, they're like serial innovators and inventors. They have even own pools or so. They're named as inventors quite often. Therefore, it can be worth having a look in the inventor search. Can be one angle. There could be relevant publications after product launch. Does anyone do FTO updates after launch? There was some, as I heard. Therefore, in case of assembly product, it is necessary to obtain IP clearance for all subcomponents before launch, especially when there is no clarity about feature clearance over product clearance. Ask your lawyer. Ask your lawyer. I would say it is always necessary, to a certain extent. And there's always the thing like, there will be always, in terms of liability, as I have understood, there will be always question what a sane person would have done, not professional in the field, and therefore that's the thing you have to go. Therefore, my recommendation is, if you can check it, and even if it's yourself checking it, with a very few thing. They're very brilliant. I know they're very brilliant Indian search providers for low money. They do great jobs. There are these AI tools. They do a lot of automatization, which makes it easy to at least find relevant ones. What is the common price range from an FTO? The search aspect, as I said, starts, if you go very, very cheap, and you have an Indian friend who really likes you, €1,000 to 5,000, 10,000 euros for the search aspects. And for the infringement, if you think like, okay, usually with an FTO, if you not have any digital stuff, it's like 5 to 10 relevant documents, depending on your context. Each document for 10,000 euros, depending on if you need that legal opinion. This is a range, and therefore you're very easily, but it's difficult. And this is also like matter what you negotiate with your attorney, and what kind of context you have. I hope this answers your question. Best you do it before developing the product. In Germany, we have an employee inventions law according to which inventors might have to be paid for the inventions. So a search is usually done for every invention. Very good answer, thank you. Also, we speak about IP rights. What about inventor rights? Therefore, sometimes it can be tricky, but this is like, I know most German companies, they tend now to just buy all rights from the inventor, and then it's done with that. How to do FTO and semiconductor topology, since various new gen products have circuit with normally are not done. Okay, I don't fully understand that question. If it's there, you need to see, you need to build some criteria to compare and to see if it's relevant or not. Therefore, this is difficult. It's difficult. But you need to, especially if you have very many features projects. Yeah, as I said, one aspect can be the surf paper approach, and to some point is where we say it may sane, and you can bear the risk to not do it. How do you reduce mistakes in the search strategy, as mentioned earlier? Oh, very brilliant, very brilliant. One thing is a very easy 4I principle that you give it not to another search expert. They look at it. Another thing what I do is such trial runs. For example, if I want to check if my keywords, if I have all keywords, I do the pattern class. I go for pattern classifications, and then I put not and then all my keywords. And what is found left in the classes were not identified by my keywords. And then I can see, oh, did I miss one? The other thing can be that I remove by trial and error some elements. It can be that some features that I define in my metrics, some features are very limiting, and therefore I have this like different parts that I can turn on and off, and then I see from terms of the numbers what's happening there. Therefore, in Orbit, you had call it search steps. If you use a normal database or so, you have like it's in the parentheses. Therefore, the more parentheses you do, the more you can exclude or remove them. Therefore, it's good to play with that. And then I can see the search strategy does work, and at the end, I have a viable result or not. Sometimes the search strategy can sometimes be very tricky. Usually, for me, a good search strategy, if you use normal no AI tools, with the query-based search, is always has an aspect of pattern classes and keywords. Therefore, this is the two things that I just expect from a search professional. Because I had this once where I lost a client. I had a seasoned freelancer who was doing a search for patentability. And back then I was very young, like a kitten in IP, And I would trust him, therefore I trust him. And therefore there's the famous quote from Deming where he says, "In God we trust, anyone else has to bring data or experience." The guy didn't use pattern classes. The patent attorney was right. Hey, this is not a good search. And we lost the client. So therefore for me, it's like good search strategies. They have pattern classes and keywords if you have a query-based one. Also, I like to use AI tools, I confess. I combine them with my keyword stuff together, and then I see, oh, did my search strategy deliver the rest as well? And sometimes not, and then I see, oh, okay, I have to update that. So, Markus Schneider, yeah, it's called Employee Act, yeah. Software domain costs more than anything. I don't fully get this. Software domain costs more than anything. Yeah, the software tools, you need to spend money on it. It's impossible to do so. Normal tools versus AI tools, exactly how I separate them as well. Thank you. Thank you. So Andreas does again his advertising for the group. Now we have 33 minutes after the original time. And therefore, I want to say thank you for your time, that you were tuning in. We go with a perhaps, that was a very lively discussion here. And I was so surprised. I hope you're happy with my answers. And please, if you haven't followed me, please follow me, connect with me, get into communication. We have soon a new webinar. Maybe you find this very good and want to tune in, or you think that topic is for another person very, very good. Then please recommend me. Thank you a lot for your time. You are my heroes. For the checklist, just text me in LinkedIn. I will provide you with a Word form of it so that you have it. I promise also, no, you don't get into newsletter lists or so. Don't worry. Okay? This is for you. So I wish you all the best. Stay healthy, stay secure, and very important, stay innovating. See you soon.